Welcome to the My Lean Business Benefits of Process Mapping webinar. Today, we're going to discuss how process mapping can help improve your business. My name is Chelsea Gillard, and I will be your presenter today. When people talk about process mapping, it usually stems from the need for change. Change can be planned or unplanned, but the common theme is a burning platform where one must change, or in the case of a burning oil rig, jump in order to survive. That burning platform could be a result of many things. A financial or global security crisis can cause your business to change, just as 911 changed the airline industry forever. The introduction of new technology to increase efficiencies and stay competitive in an ever-changing environment is another burning platform companies face. Re-engineering a business may be necessary to stay competitive, as well as the planned abandonment of declining products, markets, or subsidiaries in order to allocate resources to new innovations and opportunities. Mergers and acquisitions create dual functions and departments, which causes redundancies. Sometimes it's about change for the sake of change. The appointment of a new CEO or leadership may bring about changes to support a new vision or mission for the company or organization. Disorganization, a lack of productivity, and missed opportunities can also lead to internal pressures that would require change, and external pressures that come from customers, suppliers, changing government regulations and financial markets may also require change. So why process mapping? When we are faced with change, we should have a lot of questions. Process mapping can help answer those pertinent questions, such as, where do we start? What needs to change? What systems are involved? Who is doing what, when, and how? What dependencies may exist for this process? How do we streamline or change the process and make it more efficient? How do we know what activities are producing waste? And how would or should a new process work? Typically, these decisions are made in a vacuum without the benefit of getting an understanding of how a process really works. In order to change or improve a process, one must first understand how the process works today. So process mapping helps us to distinguish the difference between how work is actually done from how we think it's being done. What we think happens is that our processes are pretty much straightforward because, after all, we do get things done. But what's really happening is that our processes over time become very complicated and convoluted. Excessive handoffs and transfers of information exist, as well as stage gates in the form of approvals and reviews. Broken systems and manual steps only lead to bottlenecks and delays. Of course, what we want is to operate a streamlined process with no delays. Ed Deming is the godfather in business process improvement, and he says that if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Oftentimes, we operate in silos and only consider what we know and what we do. However, we are not always aware of how what we do affects processes upstream and downstream. Fixing your problem that you know like the back of your hand may not get at the root cause of problems. We would need to understand the entire process to really improve a process. In other words, get a 360-degree perspective in order to provide effective solutions. And that's what process mapping allows us to do. We are able to identify who is doing what, when, why, and how. We gain an understanding of the different systems that are being utilized in order to process work. We're able to understand those dependencies that might exist upstream and downstream. And then also identify pain points or opportunities for improvement, and then analyze the root causes of problems that might exist in a process. Before we continue, let's talk about what a process is. We perform processes every day. How we get ready for work, how we get to work, even how we brew coffee is a process. A business process is what we do in our daily activities to keep a business running, to produce services and goods for the benefit of a profit. So the way we manufacture and produce goods is a business process. How we fulfill orders and conduct our invoicing processes, hiring new employees, these are all business processes. So then process mapping is an exercise in which individuals and/or teams of subject matter experts, our SMEs, gather to determine and document those business processes. Or in other words, just how are we getting work done? The photo to the right is a perfect example of a team of SMEs documenting tasks performed in their respective functions. They are using Post-it notes to write the task performed and place it on the board in sequential order in order to build a visual diagram of the process that can be reviewed by all. The photo to the left is the end result of that exercise. This is depicting the entire process from the perspective of each group or SME. The end goal is to take that information and create a process map, the visual diagram that's depicting the flow of that process across functions, people, and systems. We use flowcharting software programs to create those process maps. Visio happens to be one of the most commonly used programs, but there are many others. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. There are two ways to use process maps. One way is to capture the current state of how the business functions today. This is done in order to establish a baseline from which improvements can be made. The other is to document the future state and create a new business process to support a new operating model. This involves designing processes from scratch. Let's talk about each. So when we capture the current state, again, we're defining the existing structure of a business process. We do this to leverage best practices from our existing processes, conduct an inventory of the systems used to support the process, identify gaps and inefficiencies in the process, eliminate waste, and learn the financial impact of problems. We can also measure the performance of the current state. So how well is this process performing today? And then lastly, we can determine how far we are from the desired future state. So basically we can answer, can we improve this process? Or do we need to start from scratch? Then there's the future state, where we define the ideal structure for a process. Future state maps allows you to create those what-if scenarios for modeling or optimizing processes prior to implementation or launching a new or improved process. So when we're developing processes for products or services, or after an improvement project, we're designing future state maps. Let's look at a few examples of how process mapping helped two organizations. An advertising group wanted to know how they could streamline ad production activities and reduce errors. An extensive mapping session was conducted where SMEs were brought together and activities, roles, and systems were identified and documented. The outcomes of that mapping session resulted in the identification of bottlenecks in the process and redundancies, as well as those manual tasks that were causing the errors. We worked to consolidate systems in order to reduce ad production activities, and that resulted in a reduction by 30%, which helped to increase production by 100 ad campaigns per year. And what that meant was we were able to identify an opportunity for revenue enhancement of over $500,000. This is just by mapping their processes, understanding what they're doing today, identifying those errors, eliminating those errors, resulted in this great outcome. Another production group wanted to figure out how to leverage technologies across divisions and business units in order to streamline their production activities. So we did the same thing here. We identified that they were using 30 different systems across 3 to 5 groups, and those systems performed similar tasks. So there was a lot of overlap in the purchasing of systems to produce their product. We also learned that some of these systems were no longer supported. So in other words, system failures would halt production for some products, and there was no backup plan. This was something leadership was not aware of and became a priority to address. We decommissioned some systems. We consolidated processes and the systems that were being utilized, recommended standards between the business units so that they were producing pretty much in the same way, and identified best practices moving forward. At the conclusion of the analysis, we realized that their international counterpart had similar processes and had begun outsourcing some of their activities, which was much more cost-effective for the company. So in the end, we were also able to recommend outsourcing of their production activities that would result in saving the company millions. We would not have been able to come to this conclusion without first understanding the current state. Some other benefits of process mapping include protecting knowledge capital. Companies spend a lot of time and money training employees, then they leave. Oftentimes, they leave with vital information. Could be due to layoffs, transfers, leaves of absences, or general attrition. In any way, in any regard, employees leave with the knowledge they learned, leaving the organization or company to scramble and figure out how they perform tasks. This creates an unproductive environment and can negatively impact the business. Process maps capture those critical business processes to keep the business running. Process maps also help to improve communication, allowing companies to create standards so that the most efficient process is being followed by all. This helps to reduce variation in quality and output. You can also use process maps as the input into creating standard operating procedures and job descriptions. If you are a company subject to compliance and auditing, process maps provide all the information typically needed during an audit. Documenting procedures, systems used, and highlighting roles and responsibilities are typically what's reviewed during auditing sessions. One of the most beneficial aspects of process mapping is how it increases staff productivity and engagement. It helps to create a more collaborative environment, helping to eliminate those silos we often find ourselves working in, and create an environment of teamwork. And then lastly, it helps to foster a continuous improvement environment. Process maps are living documents that are meant to be reviewed and updated as a business grows and changes throughout the life of a process. So how do we get there? To build effective process maps that can make a difference in your organization, you need to learn a few things. The first are data collection methods. You need to learn how to capture relevant information. Capturing information that is not accurate renders the process map useless. Then there are standards. We want to build maps that make sense, that are easy to read and understand. And then there's the types of process maps. We want to choose the best map to get the information you seek. Capturing metrics was key to identifying opportunities in the case studies we reviewed. Without it, we can just qualify and validate processes. But we want to take it a step further. We want to be able to quantify results as well. Then you need to analyze maps in order to find those opportunities for improvement. And there are a few ways to do that. And then lastly, you need to know how to choose the software program that is right for your team and your organization. So let's go over each of these. Data collection is the most important aspect of building process maps. There are many ways to collect data, interviewing and observation, just to name a few. However, there are 3 things to consider when collecting data. The first is you need the right information. You can spend a significant amount of time capturing and documenting processes, but if the information is not accurate or up to date, it's useless. Process maps are used to make important business decisions, such as making capital purchases, whether it be systems or equipment. It could involve adding or eliminating headcount. So executives rely on this information, so it has to be correct. Second, you need to make sure you have the right amount of information. You need to ensure that the data you're collecting goes deep and wide enough in order to identify problems and make changes that will actually make a difference. And thirdly, you need to consider whether or not you have the right people involved. Making sure you have the right people will be the key to success. We don't want gaps in our process because we didn't invite the right people to be involved. Collecting data is not always easy. Sometimes SMEs withhold information due to fears of blame. No one wants to be blamed for poor processes. Process mapping is very revealing. So people will hold information so that they don't receive backlash, for example. Sometimes SMEs just simply disagree with the need for change. So you may receive pushback. Another reason is that people sometimes are afraid of losing their job or having their roles changed if they feel that they're sharing information that could result in someone losing their job. You need to learn how to overcome these obstacles so that you are able to create effective process maps. There are numerous symbols available in flowcharting programs, but there are about a dozen standard symbols that we use for process maps. Process maps are meant to be a high-level way of communicating about how a process works. So we use symbols to identify each type of activity being performed. So for example, if a task is being performed by a system, we'll use a system symbol. If there's a manual step in a process, we'll use a manual system. If a decision is being made, we'll use a decision symbol. The purpose of using these symbols is to communicate in a quick, succinct way. Then there are writing standards. Again, because process maps are a high-level way of communicating about a process, there's very little space to describe activities. So we have to be succinct in our writing in order to create an easy-to-read process map. In this example, an analyst is describing the activities they perform. They're reviewing a document to determine if there are errors. They make a go or no-go decision and they pass it off to another department. And then they're describing how it's done. That doesn't fit in any symbol box. And so the way we would truncate this information would be to simply create or use a decision symbol and ask, are there errors? And if yes, we'll take a path and describe those activities. And if no, we'll describe those activities in a different path. That's just an example of how information needs to be truncated. Then there are structural standards in the way we build process maps in order to prevent something like this. This is actually easy to do because processes seem to go this way. It can be this convoluted, but learning structural standards helps to avoid this so that maps are easy to read and understand. Let's talk about the types of process maps. There are various types of maps depending on the goals of your organization. You can choose maps that highlight simple activities. These are typically your non-functional processes where groups do not need to be highlighted. If there are more complex processes involving one or more groups, we use a different type of map to make sure that we capture each role and their responsibilities. We can also map the movement of people, equipment, and products throughout a workspace, if that's something that needs to be captured. And then there's a map that focuses on value-added activities from the perspective of the customer, then allowing you to identify those non-value-added activities that may need to be eliminated or improved. Earlier, I mentioned that it may be difficult to get information from your SMEs. However, when it comes to complaining about what's wrong, people seem to have no problem sharing at all. As people share with you problems, you have a unique opportunity to dig for more details. The difference at Mylene Business is that we capture metrics that tell the story about how effective the process is. There are several important metrics to capture, but for example, some of the questions we ask. How long does it take to perform this task? What costs are associated with the task? Having this information will help to quantify problems, determine the effectiveness of the process, and also prioritize work, believe it or not. Once process maps have been created, knowing how to analyze maps will help you achieve the goal of the change that needs to occur. So if you're looking for ways to eliminate waste, maybe reduce costs, change, consolidate roles, improve a product, or increase customer satisfaction, you need to know how to analyze your maps. At Mylene Business, we focus on 3 ways. The first way, we're looking for those quick wins to immediately improve a process. So we're looking to pick that low-hanging fruit that would provide some relief to a process that has become very complicated or convoluted. We go in depth on how you can do this. We also use lean tools to identify and eliminate waste. And lean is a business methodology that is utilized to identify and eliminate common waste found in business. And then we teach you how to perform a root cause analysis to understand the causes of problems. There are many flowcharting software programs available. Like I said earlier, Visio is the most commonly used program, but there are others. SmartDraw is on the lower end price-wise. But the key things to consider when choosing a program include the ease of use, the affordability in terms of the licenses you may want to purchase, and then the type of technical support that would be available to your team. So in summary, change is constant, but we use process mapping as a tool to help meet those challenges. Remember, process mapping helps us to answer those pertinent questions, such as what needs to change, what systems are involved, who's doing what, when, and how do we streamline or change a process. But it's also very important that we use these keys and we know and learn these keys to building useful maps that aid in decision making and lead to effective change. Learning best practices such as the standards, the data collection methods, analysis techniques. These are the best ways to build effective process maps. We teach all of this, of course, at Mylene Business. We have 2 courses. One is a beginner course where we're practicing how to create basic process maps. You'll learn the different types and levels of maps, and you'll also have the opportunity to create a simple process map. Then there's an advanced course where we focus more on more complex processes, where we're developing cross-functional process maps. You're learning the standards for the content, the structure, and the symbols. We're capturing metrics, and we're utilizing analysis techniques such as lean for the benefit of business improvement. Both courses are available online or in person. You can visit our website at mylenebiz.com/training for more information. To learn more or to find other resources, visit us at mylenebiz.com. Or you can email us at info@mylenebiz.com or follow us on Twitter at mylenebiz. If you have any questions regarding this presentation or about process mapping in general, feel free to call us. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for attending the Benefits of Process Mapping webinar. Happy mapping!